Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Gaurav Sharma and with me is Nishit Kumar bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Countries across Europe tighten restrictions as the new COVID variant, Omicron infections rise. Nearly 11,500 flights cancelled around the world since Friday. In the United States, CDS officials halve isolation times from 10 to 5 days to ease disruptions caused by staff shortage. In the Indian capital, Delhi, yellow alert sounded in view of rising COVID-19 cases. Schools, colleges, sports complexes, cinema and banquet halls closed with immediate effect. Pakistani Rupee depreciates nearly 31% against the US dollar during the last 3 years and 4 months. And in cricket, India resumed its second innings against South Africa at Centurion in the first cricket test, and Australia crushed England by an innings and 14 runs in the third Ashes test to take an unassailable 3-0 series lead at Melbourne. As India marches towards administering 150 crore vaccine doses against COVID-19, news about the new corona variant is a cause of concern. In this situation, we appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and help others get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011-239-78046 and 1075. And now, the news in detail. As Omicron cases continued to shoot up in Europe and the United States, the travel industry saw thousands of flights getting cancelled. Apart from stringent travel restrictions, numerous storms in the US and COVID-stricken airline crew too compounded the issue. Around 11,500 flights have been cancelled around the world since Friday, according to an AFP report. Flight cancellations disrupted holiday travel as airlines called off more than 1,000 US flights because crews were sick with COVID-19 during one of the year's busiest travel periods, and storm fronts added to the havoc. Meanwhile, countries across Europe are tightening restrictions as infections rise and the new Omicron variant spreads through the continent. We have a report.
France has announced tighter COVID restrictions amid concerns over the Omicron variant. From 3rd January, remote working will become compulsory for those who can. Public gatherings will be limited to 2,000 people for indoor events. The news comes after France recorded more than 100,000 new infections, the highest number reported in the country since the pandemic began. However, no curfew has been announced on the eve of New Year. Studies suggest that the new strain is milder than the Delta, with 30% to 70% lower chance of infected people ending up in hospital. But there are fears the sheer number of cases could overwhelm hospitals. French Prime Minister Jean Castex termed the pandemic felt like a film without an ending as he unveiled the new measures at a new conference following a crisis cabinet meeting. The new rules also include limits on outdoor public gatherings, which will be restricted to 5,000 people, and a ban on eating and drinking or long-distance transport. Mask wearing will become compulsory in city centers. Nightclubs will remain closed until further notice, and cafes and bars will be able to provide table service only. Employees who work from home will have to do so at least 3 days a week. The government is also shortening the length of time between booster shots from 4 months after the last vaccination to 3 months. Schools will also reopen as planned on 3rd of January. In Germany, gatherings have been restricted and gyms, swimming pools, nightclubs and cinemas will be closed to the public in several states. Private gatherings of vaccinated people will also be limited to a maximum of 10. Greece announced further restrictions effective from January 3rd to 16 to contain a further upsurge in COVID-19 infections, including the Omicron variant, targeting mainly nighttime entertainment venues. Denmark, with a population of 5.8 million, currently has the world's highest infection rate as it has 1,612 cases per 100,000 people. It has closed cultural attractions and limited opening hours in bars and restaurants in a bid to stem new infections. And before Christmas, Iceland cut the number of people allowed at gatherings amid soaring case numbers. Until mid-December, the island nation had never reported more than 200 daily cases, but in the past 24 hours, it has registered a record 672 infections. Restrictions on opening hours came into force on bars and restaurants in Finland on Tuesday, with bars closing in the early evening hours. Spain is dealing with the highest ever number of coronavirus infections, with some regions constraining further curbs on social life ahead of the end of the year. Authorities reported 120 new deaths since December 23rd. On the other hand, in the United Kingdom, the Health Secretary Sajid Javid has said no further COVID restrictions will be implemented in England before the new year. But he said people should remain cautious and celebrate outside on New Year's Eve if possible. Both England and Scotland reported record cases over Christmas. Abhishek Mukhopadhyay for World News, All India Radio.
In the United States, officials have decided to shorten isolation times for many Americans as Omicron surges. The Centers for Disease Control officials have halved the recommended isolation time for people with asymptomatic COVID-19 from 10 to 5 days amid a surge in cases. They said this must be followed by 5 days of wearing a mask around others. It said most transmissions happened in the 2 days before and 3 days after the symptoms developed. The measure is expected to alleviate disruptions caused by staff shortages in many areas because of infections. The sharp rise in cases has been fueled by the Omicron variant of the virus, which is now dominant in the US. The growing number of people becoming infected and having to isolate has put pressure on several industries, including air travel, with thousands of flights cancelled during the Christmas holiday. The CDC said the new recommendation was motivated by science, and the announcement came as more than 2 lakh daily infections were confirmed in the past 2 days nationwide. Dr. Rochelle Walensky, the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said that the Omicron variant is spreading quickly and has the potential to impact all the facets of their society.
In the Indian capital, Delhi, yellow alert has been sounded amid rising cases of COVID-19. Schools, colleges, cinema halls, spas, gyms, multiplexes, banquet halls, auditoriums and sports complexes have been closed with immediate effect. Night curfew has been imposed in the city from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Restrictions have been put in place as a yellow alert has been sounded in Delhi under the Graded Response Action Plan. As per the Delhi Disaster Management Authority order, the Delhi Metro and buses will operate at 50% seating capacity with no standing passengers. Restaurants are allowed 50% seating capacity from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and bars are allowed with 50% seating capacity from 12 noon to 10 p.m. Political, religious and festival gatherings have been banned. A maximum of 20 persons can attend funerals and weddings. In its order, the DDMA said weddings can only be done at home. Shops in malls will operate on odd-even basis in the city. Religious places will be open, but no visitors will be allowed. Only walking, running and playing are allowed in public parks and gardens, and not picnics. 653 cases of Omicron have been reported in India so far. Out of the total Omicron cases, Maharashtra has reported 167 cases, followed by Delhi 165, Kerala 57 cases and Telangana 55 cases. The Union Health Minister said as of now 186 people have recovered from the infection. India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed 143 crore milestone today. The Union Health Minister said more than 57 lakh COVID vaccine doses were administered today. Out of the total vaccination, more than 83 crore 97 lakh vaccine doses have been given as the first dose, while over 59 crore 10 lakh doses have been administered as the second dose. The minister said 6,450 COVID patients were recovered during the last 24 hours, and the national recovery rate stands at 98.40%.
Bangladesh started the booster dose of COVID-19 vaccination in Dhaka on a limited scale from Tuesday. A few hospitals in Dhaka started administering the Pfizer vaccine jab for people above the age of 60 who had earlier received 2 doses of the vaccine. People already registered on the Shuroka app of the government will get a message for the booster dose vaccination in specified hospitals of Dhaka. The process was started 10 days back on Sunday last on an experimental basis, which has now been integrated into the Shuroka app for a specified group of people. Health Secretary Lokman Hussain told media that the Bangladesh government has already secured purchase or donation of 31 to 32 crore doses of the COVID-19 vaccine from multiple sources. Out of it, about 15 crore doses have already arrived in Bangladesh. More than 71.74 million people have received the first dose of the vaccine, while 49.57 million people have received both the doses of the vaccine in the country. India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Vikram Doraiswamy, has said that sub-region connectivity is in the interests of all countries in the sub-region. Speaking to a prominent local daily of Bangladesh, Mr. Doraiswamy cited the World Bank study which projects that seamless connectivity between India and Bangladesh could boost its national income by 17%, while India's national income would also rise by 8% and boost its export almost 3 times. Calling for opening up more land ports for unrestricted trade, the High Commissioner said that the monopoly of one border crossing for trade works as the biggest non-tariff barrier to trade on both sides. Speaking about connectivity between various countries in the sub-region, the Indian High Commissioner pointed out that India is already providing rail transit to Nepal. India is also providing facilitation for goods trade between Nepal and Bangladesh and Bhutan and Bangladesh. However, the transshipment using Chattogram and Mongla ports is yet to take off through the trial run was conducted more than 18 months back and SOP finalized more than 2 years back. Highlighting the importance of rail connectivity, High Commissioner Vikram Doraiswamy said that it will be a game changer for Bangladesh just as it is for the entire region.
United Nations has called for an investigation following reports that at least 35 people were killed by Myanmar's military on the Christmas Eve in Kaya State. UN Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths said reports of the killing of civilians, including at least one child, were credible. He said he is horrified by reports of an attack against civilians and he condemns the grievous incident and all attacks against civilians throughout the country which are prohibited under the international humanitarian law. Griffiths called for a thorough and transparent investigation so the perpetrators could be brought to justice. Meanwhile, Save the Children has confirmed that 2 of its staff were killed in a Christmas Eve massacre. UK-based organisation said in a statement that both employees were new fathers. The ruling military has not commented on the killings near Moso village in Kaya State.
Indonesia will lift a ban on the Boeing 737 MAX. The country's transportation ministry announced this on Tuesday. The decision comes 3 years after the local carrier Lion Air lost one of the planes in a fatal crash during a routine domestic flight. As many as 189 people were killed when the flight plunged into the Java Sea shortly after takeoff in October 2018. A similarly deadly incident with an Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX the following March prompted aviation authorities around the world to ground the aircraft. The approval for its return comes months after the model returned to service in the United States and Europe and follows more recent lifting of grounding orders in other countries including Australia, Japan, India, Malaysia, Singapore and Ethiopia. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Pakistani Rupee is one of the world's worst performing currencies, declining by almost 12% since the start of the year and more than 17% after having bottomed out to 152.50 to a dollar in mid-May, local media reported on Tuesday. Dawn reported that by the end of 2021, the Pakistan government had to once again turn to the International Monetary Fund to put the economy into stabilization mode. The paper further reported that the State Bank of Pakistan has taken numerous measures to stabilize the rupee, and the Federal Investigation Agency is continuously cracking down on hoarders and smugglers to restrict the outflow of the American currency and ease its demand. The flight of the dollar continues. The Pakistani rupee has depreciated 30.5% against the US dollar in the last 3 years and 4 months under the current government of Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan. According to the News International, the value of Pakistani rupee has fallen from rupees 123 against the US dollar in August 2018 to rupees 177 against the US dollar in December 2021, a decline of 30.5% over the last 40 months. This makes it one of the highest devaluations of the currency in the country's history. Notably, the only other higher devaluation occurred following the falling of Dhaka, and Pakistan's currency was devalued by 58% from rupees 4.60 to rupees 11.10 against the US dollar in 1971-72. And in today's hotspot section, we bring you a special highlight: India to chair UNSC Committee on Counter-Terrorism in the new year. The participants are former diplomat Skand Ranjan Tayal and journalist Simran Sodhi.
Today we will be discussing the fact that India will chair the Counter-Terrorism Committee in the United Nations Security Council next month, that is in the January of 2022, and this will also be a unique opportunity for India to head this issue and also present to the world how grave a problem terrorism has become, especially in light of the fact that India itself has repeatedly been at the receiving end of cross-border terrorism. Ambassador Tyal, when you see this event happening next month, how much do you think this will give India a platform to globally present its views and also be a part of the global discussion as to how we counter terrorism in a world that is rapidly changing? But also what we find is that globalized world is also facing terrorism almost in every part of the world today, whether it is India, it is France, it is UK.
To give a little bit of the background, India has been a victim of cross-border terrorism for more than 3 decades, almost 4 decades, since the 1980s. And the world was never appreciating the problem India and some other countries were facing. Then after the terrorist attacks on United States on 11th of September 2001, the world really woke up to this menace which was global, but mostly it was emanating from our neighborhood, from our Pakistan-Afghanistan region. And in response to that, this committee on counter-terrorism was established by the UN Security Council in 2001. After the September attacks. And as we all understand, terrorism is cross-border and it does not respect either nation or any kind of political boundaries. So to combat terrorism, it is very important that all the countries come together, pool their resources, exchange information, and then confront terrorism. So the objective of this committee on counter-terrorism was really twofold: to enhance the legal and institutional ability of individual countries to confront terrorism and to stop financing of terrorism, safe havens, etc. And the other very important part was to monitor cooperation in investigation and persecution of terrorist acts. And this committee has had mixed success till now on financing, etc. Some important decisions have been taken. But we have seen that Pakistan has not been cooperating in investigating and persecuting the acts of terrorism and the terrorists who are there in now in Pakistan and earlier in AFPAC region. So when India chairs this committee in January, it will be a time for us to work together with other countries which are victims of terrorism and put more pressure on Pakistan to stop all kinds of safe havens which terrorists have in Pakistan and to take action against them. As we know, whether it is Lashkar-e-Taiba, whether it is Jaish-e-Mohammed, Masood Azhar, Dawood Ibrahim, no action has been taken by Pakistan against them.
Ambassador Tyal, as you pointed out, Pakistan, and this is something which we have been discussing. A lot of people have been writing on this issue, that Pakistan remains the main sponsor of cross-border terrorism. And we've also seen that time and again globally India has raised it. A few other nations have expressed concern. But we also find that there is a strange dynamic which plays on the global platform, especially in the UN. We have seen attempts to bring Pakistan to some kind of accountability for its role in cross-border terrorism, which is shielded by China. So how does one deal with a problem called Pakistan, especially in light of the fact that you have a very strong, aggressive China, which seems to protect it at almost every global platform today?
I have always been very surprised at why the global community is so reluctant and hesitant in taking concrete action against Pakistan when time and again it has been proven. Then whether it was Al-Qaeda, whether it was all kinds of terrorists, they have all sanctuaries in Pakistan. And now with the open backing of China, perhaps many countries are trying to broker some kind of a deal with Pakistan that the terrorists hiding there and under Pakistani ISI protection, they should not take action against those particular countries, and then they will not take action against Pakistan. That is very, very worrying, and it may happen that India may get a little isolated because Pakistan's focus is on promoting terrorism in India, and it will be willing to have deals with, let us say, China, with Russia, with Iran, that it will not allow terrorists operating from Pakistan to attack them. But India will have to find its own solutions. Yes, Committee on Counter-Terrorism will be very helpful in choking the flow of funds, but in actually taking action against Pakistan, I do not expect the UN Security Council committee to take any action, particularly because China has veto powers there and it will always protect Pakistan.
Ambassador Thail, we've also seen when we look at the events happening in Afghanistan, and this has been under observation since August when the Taliban took over the country, we find a more confident Pakistan now in the region. And we also find that there are real concerns, real worries that the Taliban ruling Afghanistan now leads to even a more delicate situation, especially for India and also for a lot of countries like Russia, Iran and globally, that this could become the new place or the new launching pad for terrorism. Do you feel that the committee which meets next month would take cognizance of this fact? And is this something that will be discussed, and can one expect some movement forward as how do you deal with the instability that has come about with the changes in Afghanistan and with Pakistan now acting more confident in the region? How does one look at all this that is happening regionally?
The takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban in August is of concern to the entire world, but is of very much concern to India. The Taliban, which were designated as terrorists earlier, they now rule Afghanistan, and we have to face the reality that they will continue to rule over Afghanistan because neither there is any internal major opposition to them, and they have defeated earlier Soviet Union and now roundly defeated NATO and United States. So no country has military power to defeat them. Now in the Taliban provisional government, 14 ministers out of 33 are in the UN Security Council lists of terrorists. They are blacklisted. Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is their Home Minister, Minister of Interior of this Taliban provisional government, he has a $10 million bounty over his head. So it is a different situation. It is a very different regional situation. And if we carefully watch how the neighboring countries have been dealing with this Taliban government, again I would emphasize that whether it is China, whether it is Russia, whether it is Iran and even United States, they are trying to have a deal with the Taliban government that no attack on their territory should emanate from Afghanistan. They should control those elements which are inimical to these countries, and then they can rule over Afghanistan and do whatever they want. And again, India is isolated in some sense because we have a very principled position, and our track record, the past history shows since 90s that Taliban have been very much against India's interests. We all remember the Indian Airlines plane which was hijacked to Kandahar, and then how the then Taliban government held those hijackers, and Masood Azhar is still a thorn in our flesh who was released at that time. So for us, you are right, it will be difficult, and in my assessment, I do not expect that this UNSC Committee on Counter-Terrorism will take any further action against the Taliban terrorists who are listed or not listed, because most of the members of the UN Security Council are trying to find some via media of working with this new provisional Taliban government of Afghanistan.
And we will continue our discussions on the issue of terrorism, counter-terrorism, and we will also follow the upcoming meeting in the UNSC on the counter-terrorism, which India will chair. With these thoughts, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Sensex and the Nifty today rose around 0.9%. Both stocks gained amid positive cues from the global equity markets. The Sensex closed near 57,900 while the Nifty settled above 17,200. A report from the business world.
The BSE Sensex climbed 477 points or 0.83% to trade at 57,897. The NSE Nifty also surged 147 points or 0.86% to trade at 17,233. Asian share markets logged robust gains. Japan's Nikkei surged 1.4%, Singapore's Straits Times rose 0.8% and South Korea's Kospi climbed 0.7%. China's Shanghai Composite Index ended 0.4% up and Hong Kong's Hang Seng added 0.2%. Oil prices extended gains with Brent crude trading near $80 a barrel despite the rapid spread of the Omicron coronavirus variant. Rajesh Lake for World News, All India Radio.
In the first cricket test, India were at 16 for 1 in 6 overs with the lead of 146 runs over South Africa at stumps on day 3 of the ongoing first test at the Super Sport Park in Centurion on Tuesday. The visiting side is in full control of the game but has lost its opener Mayank Agarwal early in the second innings. Marco Jensen was the only wicket taker for South Africa in the second innings of the Indian batting. At stumps, KL Rahul was unbeaten on 5 and Shardul Thakur on 4. India bowled out South Africa for 197 runs to take a 130-run first innings lead. Mohammad Shami was the pick of the Indian bowlers on day 3 as the pacer had taken 5-wicket haul to complete his 200 wickets in Test cricket. The visitors lost 7 wickets for just 55 runs today and were bowled out for 327. The score so far is India 327 all out and 16 for 1 and South Africa 197 all out. England surrendered the Ashes on the morning of the third day of the third test as Australia crushed them by an innings and 14 runs to take an unassailable 3-0 series lead. Resuming on 31 for 4, England were bowled out for just 68 inside 81 minutes with debutant Scott Boland taking an astonishing 6 for 7. Their final 5 wickets fell in the space of 30 balls as England offered the weakest of resistance in front of a jubilant home crowd at the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
And now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian reports Russian court orders closure of country's oldest human rights group. Sputnik News writes Taliban opened fire on protesters near former Ministry of Women's Affairs in Kabul. Todo News reports Afghanistan Supreme Court employs protest over unpaid salaries. South China Morning Post reports China asks US to stop Elon Musk's satellites approaching its space station. The Japan Times says Omicron offers stark reminder of human cost of Japan's border controls. And the Wall Street Journal says Omicron disruptions prompt easing of some restrictions. Before we wind up, let us take a quick look at the headlines once again. Countries across Europe tighten restrictions as the new COVID variant Omicron infections rise. Nearly 11,500 flights cancelled around the world since Friday. In the United States, CDC officials halve isolation times from 10 to 5 days to ease disruptions caused by staff shortage. In the Indian capital Delhi, yellow alert sounded in view of rising COVID-19 cases. Schools, colleges, sports complexes, cinema and banquet halls closed with immediate effect. Pakistani Rupee depreciates nearly 31% against the US dollar during the last 3 years and 4 months. And in cricket, India resumed its second innings against South Africa at Centurion in the first cricket test, and Australia crushed England by an innings and 14 runs in the third Ashes test to take an unassailable 3-0 lead at Melbourne.
India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan Vaishnavajan by artists from Suriname.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.